Okay, there we go. Now our button is up there. We just don't see it. So now what we want to have happen is when we click on these squares, we want to keep a count of how many clicks we have. And just to prove that, why don't we have some communication between these guys? And I'll show you a couple different ways of communicating. So besides having this button that you ultimately want to appear after 14 clicks, let's say,
Correct.
you can change that to whatever you want. I'm also we're gonna throw a label up here as well. And the label's gonna show us our current count. All right, so we'll start that guy off as 0. And we'll center the thing in there. All right, and then let me go ahead and give myself a outlet to that label as well. Because right now the challenge that we have is we have this collection view that's in his own view controller. We have this new view controller that we just created that is obviously his own view controller. And then we've embedded the collection view inside of that new view controller. And we need that new view controller to kind of know about the collection view that's embedded within him. And they need to be able to communicate with each other because we're actually clicking on the collection view, right? But we want to change stuff that's on the view controller. So those two guys need to be aware of each other. And we have a couple of interesting ways of doing this. I'm going to show you kind of the straightforward way, and then I'll show you the cool kid way of doing it that uses something that you might find handy for other things called Notification Center. So let me add my outlet here. And this Notification Center is actually really slick. At some point, well, I'll talk about it here in a few minutes, but have I ever talked to you about the observer design pattern?
I don't think so.
Okay. But we did talk about singleton at some point, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so when we do we'll do the non-observer version of this first, and then I'm going to show you observer, which is super powerful. It'll work for what we're doing here, but it'll work for so much more too. We'll call this guy my label, which will be a UI label. And then let's go hook that dude up. Is it warm where you are now too? Did it get warm outside?
Yeah, it's kind of sad how it's like flip-flop weather in February.
Well, I mean, we're in the middle of February. I think it's going to be close to 70 degrees today.
Yeah.
We don't.
I didn't get that. It's like 65 Saturday.
Yeah. We don't get 70 degrees in February in Wisconsin very often. We usually still have like 10 inches of snow on the ground.
Right.
Let's see. Okay, so I have my label and stuff hooked up here. All right, let's just run that real quick just to make sure the layouts are okay, so we don't have that problem sitting in front of us. And then we'll go ahead and connect these guys up. Drag this to the side just a little bit. Because we're going to have to use Apple's built-in mechanism for this. Okay, good. So, whenever... Did I lose you? All right, well, the recording's still going. I'll wait about 30 seconds. Oh, there you go.
Something must have happened to my screen or something.
Yeah, no worries. Can you still see Xcode?
Yeah, I can still see it.
Okay. All right. So now I just tested it. The label and stuff is showing up, so we're good there. Now, the one thing you want to kind of make a mental note of, and you may have done this already, but whenever you see something like this, the little line that goes between multiple view controllers, that means that something called a segue is involved. And we looked at segues initially, the difference between using the storyboard to generate a view controller versus having the view controller magically created for you by using the control click drag thing. Okay, so Whenever something like this happens, that means a segue is involved. We've seen them by having a button segue to something else. Well, in this case, this segue is involved with an embed. All right, so we want to go into this new view controller we just created, and we want to go down to the function that's available to us for prepare for segue, and we want to gain access to this segue so that we can get access to this collection view controller. Now, what I like doing anyways, even though it's not required in this case since we only have one segue here, so we can just assume that the segue that we found is the one that we wanted, I like to go ahead and name my segues just for completeness. So I highlighted the segue guy here, and then I clicked on the little shield dude. And for the identifier for this, I'm going to call this guy collection view embed. All right, so that's going to be his identifier for that guy. All right. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my code here for our collection view container guy. And down here at the bottom, we have this commented out prepare for segue thing. And we've looked at this before, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment that here, because I'm going to need to use this guy to gain access to my collection view controller inside of here. All right. So I'm going to create a variable up top here. So we'll say var collection view. Whoa, that didn't go nearly as well as I hoped. We'll call it CV. And this guy is going to be a, what do we name that class? My collection CVC. Okay, so that's what that guy is going to be. I'm going to have a variable of type my collection CVC, and the little exclamation point says, I promise I will set this variable whenever I can, because I don't have the value yet. All right, so then down here I can ask all sorts of questions. I can say if segue dot identifier is not equal to, let's see, we're in Swift, not equal to nil, and segue dot identifier is equivalent to collection view embed. So this is more just, just some error checking. We know for a fact this guy's only going to get called once, and we know it's the one we want. But just for completeness here, I'm going to say I want to make sure that my segue identifier actually exists, and I want to also make sure it's specifically the dude that I think it is. If both of those things are true, let's go ahead and set self.cv equal to segue dot destination, which is going to be where this guy's leading, as a my collection CVC. Okay, so the destination view controller this segue is going to is actually the instance of my collection CVC. So now I have access to this guy. Now, on top of that, we also need our collection CVC to have access to me. Okay, because he's gonna be the one receiving the clicks, and he needs to be able to update this dude. In fact, really, it's probably more important that he has access to this guy rather than this guy have access to him. So let's go over here to my collection CVC, but we'll see that we can give them access to each other. And I'll go ahead and create a variable in here. So var, let's call this guy my container. And my container is going to be a collection view container VC. One of those dudes. Okay, so now we've given him a variable that can hold that information. And I've promised that I'll set it. That's what the exclamation point is again. So we'll go back in here. And now that we've set our VC, we'll say self.cv dot my container is equal to, I want to set that collection CVC's container equal to this guy. How do I do that?
To which one?
I want it to be equal to this guy right here, this collection view container VC. So I want my view controller.
Oh, just couldn't you do the segue destination as a finish point again?
Well, I already set that, so I did that in here. So let's go back in here. Maybe I asked the question poorly. All right, so inside of my collection CVC, I've advertised that I'm going to have a variable called my container.
Right.
Inside of my collection view container, I've advertised I'm going to have a variable called CV. I've already set CV equal to the segue's destination. But now I want to set that CV's my container equal to this guy right here, the guy I'm currently in. How do I reference myself from within myself?
Oh, just do self dot.
Yep, just self, just like that. All right. So I let him know about me. All right. So now they both know about each other in case we need it, but this is probably the more important of the two for this particular example. Okay. So we do that. Now what we'll do is let's go ahead and create a variable up here, maybe called click count. Start that guy off at 0. We'll give ourselves a function. Func update clicks. And we'll say click count plus equals 1. And then we'll say self dot my label dot text is equal to self dot click count. Like that. All right, so now this container knows how to update clicks if that's called, and my collection CVC knows how to contact this container. So every single time, so let's go back into our collection CVC. Right now, when we click on one of our cells, here's our cell for did select cell at index path, this guy. Rather than doing this stuff where we show a new screen, what we're going to do is we're going to say self dot my container dot update clicks. So we'll tell that guy to go ahead and update his clicks, and when he updates his clicks, he's going to go ahead and increase the click count and update the label. So we'll go ahead and run this. So on and so forth. You know, similarly, we could have updated it directly. We could have kept track of our click count in here and then updated the label. So now, you know, back over here in this guy, we could ask the question if click count is equal to 14, self dot label, my label, I'm sorry, not label, my button, dot alpha is equal to (1.0). Actually, kind of a cool thing just to show you how the alpha thing works. Let's see, it'll be 14 divided by, we can actually do this, self dot my button dot alpha is equal to, so once click count is 14, so we'll do click count divided by 14.0. So we should see it start fading in as we are clicking on stuff.
Right.
So it'll give it kind of an interesting look. Turn that guy into a double. That way it'll do floating point division, not... That'll work, won't it? I can't divide? So want it as... That's weird. I can't use... Is this a Swift trick thing? Okay. Maybe doubles have their own built-in divide thing. Yeah, that acts like this should work just fine. Double click count. What did I make click count? Oh, here, we'll just make click count 0.0. Then we don't have to turn that guy into a double. Is he going to be cool with it now? Let's do 2 double operands. Yeah, they've changed that operator. You can't, apparently, can't use the normal divide. Double to type CG float. All right, and alpha needs to be a CG float. So we'll just build a CG float out of that. All right, now we should fade it. And CG float stands for core graphics floating point number. It's just a special version of that. Yeah, see how button is kind of starting to fade in?
Yeah.
So it's, you know, whether that's useful to you or not, it's it's an interesting enough.
And now you can click on it. Oh no, it's
Oh yeah, you could still click on it. In fact, actually, you can click on it as soon as he's sort of visible, I believe. Yeah, as soon as you can see him at all, I believe he's clickable.
So you just have to disable the button.
You disable it or make it, you know, keep it hidden until you just show it. You know, I was just doing more of a, yeah, so you can click on it now. I was just doing this more of a, as a interesting extra thing to show you. So, you know, maybe you don't want to fade it in, but it's, you know, it is what it is, I guess. Okay, so that's one way of accomplishing that. So does that kind of make sense, how you can make these guys talk to each other?
Yeah.
All right, so now let me show you the other thing, and let me pop open the Keynote real quick so I can add the observer design pattern to that. Because this guy is going to be pretty powerful from the perspective of it's not just communicating between two screens. It's communicating to anybody who's interested. Okay. So we have the observer design pattern. So the idea of the observer design pattern is it's a good idea to be productive while waiting for an event to occur and then to be notified when it finally happens. So what we can do is we can say hey, I'm interested in being notified when X, Y, and Z happens. So, we do that all the time, whether it's a video game or something like that. We put ourselves on some email list that we want to be emailed as soon as a release date is announced or something like that. And then, when it's announced, we get an email and everybody's happy. Okay, so the observer design pattern, this doesn't talk about any sort of implementation. This just talks about the idea of it, just like Singleton did. Well, the iOS does this through something called the Notification Center. So what I'm going to do here is at the top, inside of ViewDidLoad, I'm going to tell my collection view container. That way this can happen a couple different ways. I'm going to say that this guy is interested in being notified about maybe something called, my button was clicked or something like that. So we're going to say notification, is it center? .default .add observer. All right, the thing we're going to notify, this is going to be an error at first, and then I always let it just fix it. Let's call this, we can name it whatever we want. We're interested in knowing about my button clicks. All right, and hold on, actually, I've chosen the wrong version of this constructor, so let me choose the better one. I want to add the observer that has the selector, the second one here. All right, so I'm adding myself as an observer. The selector, the selector is a fancy way of saying what method should I call when I'm notified. So this is $selector or $selector. Then I think it's update clicks like that. And then the name is going to be my button clicks, which that's the guy that's going to give me the error, and it'll fix it in a second. And then there's not going to be any object associated with it. So this guy wants me to make it some raw string. I never remember the syntax for it, so here we go. And it's notification name, raw value, then you give it the string. All right, so what this is doing is it's registering this class to be notified about this event. And whenever he gets notified about it, he's going to call the update clicks thing. Now, with this in mind, we didn't actually have to have these two screens linked to each other. We could have still done the embed so they all show up on the same screen, but we didn't need to actually make the two guys aware of each other this way. Because what we're doing now is both guys are gonna use the default notification center to let each other know about stuff. All right, so he says he's interested in when stuff happens. And then what we're going to do over here on our collection view controller side is rather than calling update clicks like we're doing now, we're going to raise that notification. So we're going to say notification center .default .post. And the name we're going to post is, again, it'll give me an error and then I'll let it fix it. And I can actually send an object along with it if I want to pass a parameter in or something, if I need to give it something beyond just that this event happened. But right now I'm not doing that. And I'll go ahead and get my raw value thing. All right, so every single time we click a button over here, we're going to post the event my button clicks. And this guy over here is constantly waiting for the my button clicks event. And whenever he receives it, he'll call update clicks. So I'll go ahead and run this. Okay, so that's all doing that with the notification center. Now, what I'm going to do here is another little thing. Let me show you a couple of other tricks. We looked at extensions last time, right? So here's a UI view extension. I almost always create a UI view controller extension, and let me show you why. For at the very least one method. So I'll create a new file, and we'll call this guy he's just going to be a normal NS object initially. And this is going to be UI view controller plus extras is usually how I name them. And then I'll go ahead and paste this guy in here, but I'll delete most of the stuff. I just like getting the syntax for the extension, even though it's not much to it. Okay. Now, what I like doing is, since pretty much any screen in an application might have a back button to go back to the previous screen, what I do is I write that IB action once. Because a lot of times it's just the default, just go back, right? So I'm going to do IB action back button pressed. And this guy's a function. Self.dismiss animated true, nothing for completion, just kind of a default back button pressed. All right, so by doing that, what I can do now, just by having that in there, every single view controller in my entire application now knows about this IB action. So I can come here to my storyboard, and let's move this button over here, and I'll go ahead and give myself a back button over here, and then I'll go ahead and here's that back button pressed action, even though I didn't implement it inside of this class specifically. So I'll do touch up inside. I'm going to go ahead and update constraints. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and reset constraints. So now I can always get back. So just show you that worked real quick. And then I'm going to show you a little bit, some more power with that observer thing. So here's my back button. It can take me back here. Now my view controller, does he know about his label? He does not. I'm going to let my view controller know about his label. All right, and we'll go ahead and give him a, well, let's see, what do we want to do? I guess we can give him a click count as well. We'll just do the same thing on both screens. And then we'll go ahead and we'll say func update clicks, click count plus equals 1, self dot label dot text is equal to click count. All right, so this is going to be occurring on this screen. Now, in order for him to participate in that notification, though, we have to come in here, and let me steal the name of my, actually, I'll steal the whole thing. We're going to let him know that he's also interested in my button clicks, that event. Okay. So now one guy raises the event, that's the collection view controller, but multiple parties are interested in that event and they can both react separately. All right. I mean, I happen to have them doing the same thing in this case, but they don't have to do the same thing. All right, so this label initially has nothing in it. Oh, hold on. I never hooked that label up. Alright, so now I'll come in here, I'll click several times, there's my 9, click back, you see this guy's 9. Make sense?
Yes.
So that notification center thing can be used, pretty effectively to do things like that when you need parts of your application that are completely distinct from each other to kind of be notified when something happens. A good trick that I've used this for is when you need let's say that you're on like screen 3 of your application and whatever you're doing might require a collection view that's a couple screens back to update based on something you just clicked. Rather than having to directly communicate with that collection view, you can just raise that event and have that collection view receive the event and do all that updating. So when you go back there, it's all refreshed and ready to go, even though you never actually directly talk to him.
Right.
So that's those are some ways you can pull some of that stuff off. Okay, so what else does that get you past the hump you were currently on?
Yeah, I think it does, actually. So after that, the next page will just be a confirmation page, and I can do that. And then I think it's actually now down to actually figuring out which hand is going to be the best. It's going to be lots of programming, but not hard programming, just time-consuming programming. Oh, yes, one thing. Before it goes to the page where you actually click the tiles, I want there to be an in-between page. It asks you if you're 13 or 14 tiles.
Okay.
And I was thinking prompt thing would be good. Like when you open your phone and a notification pops up, something like that.
Yeah, you could do that. Let's think about how that would
be a better thing. I don't know.
Well, okay, so you could do it a couple different ways. You can do a intermediate screen that just has 2 buttons on it, 13 tiles or 14 tiles. The other thing you can do is you can have, when the screen first pops up, because you're going to pre-populate it with 13 or 14 tiles. Is that correct?
What do you mean?
Like, does the screen's not going to have 13 or 14 tiles on it right off the bat. Instead, it's going to have it's just going to be setting a variable, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So another thing you can do is maybe something that's called an action sheet. So what we'll do is when we first come to this screen, we'll do it on this screen. And I'll do it on view did load. That way it's already available as soon as we get in there. We'll see it immediately. And let's see, where am I at? This guy right here. So let's just do var num tiles. Okay, and this guy will start off at, well, whatever. We'll start off at 13, but we're going to change it regardless. And then inside of view did load, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a alert. So alerts come in 2 flavors. They come in a normal alert view, and then they also come in as an action sheet. And an action sheet it'll scroll up from the bottom. So we're going to have 2 buttons that are on this. I'll just show you the difference here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a let alert equal UI alert controller. Okay, and this guy takes in a title. And we'll just say how many tiles. Oh, actually, we'll say this. We'll say number of tiles is the title, and the message is how many tiles do you want or something. And then the preferred style, this is either alert or action sheet. So we'll do alert first. You set it up identically. Now we want to have a couple of options on here. So we're going to say let's see, action 13 equal UI alert action. Title will be 13 tiles. Style, we can do either default or cancel, which just has it like a little bit grayed out sort of. And then the handler for this is the code that we want to occur when they click that action. So for us, we'll go ahead and say self.numTiles is equal to 13. Similarly, we'll go ahead and we'll create a action 14. And we'll set this guy to 14 and set the title to 14. All right, but now we need to associate these two actions with that alert. So we'll say alert.addAction, action 13, alert.addAction, action 14. And finally, we can say self.present the alert. And I'm going to say false to animated because we're actually doing this in ViewDidLoad, so we're not actually going to see it pop up on the screen. It's just going to be there. And then I don't need to do anything on completion. So this will allow you to do it not as an intermediate screen, but just on the same screen.
That's fine.
Yep, so I'll go ahead and hit play so you can see what the alert version of this looks like. Ruh-roh. I expected to see an alert there. Oh, it's the window's not in the hierarchy yet. Yeah, we can't do this in ViewDidLoad. We'll have to do it inside of like ViewDidAppear. So I'll just move it because ViewDidLoad, it didn't actually have a view controller to present the thing yet. So ViewWillAppear, we definitely have. So this is. Are you familiar with have you used ViewWillAppear before?
I think so.
Okay, so this is just the life cycle of a view controller. So we have ViewWillAppear and ViewDidAppear. So ViewWillAppear means it's about to show up on the screen. ViewDidAppear means it did show up on the screen. So by doing it will appear, we could still do the no animation. Excuse me. We could still do the no animation thing because it's actually happening before it even gets on the screen. So there's our number of tiles. How many tiles do you want? Either 13 or 14, and you'll select it. So at this, that just set that variable. So that's what it looks like for an alert. If we choose the action version of this guy, instead of alert action sheet, this will slide up from the bottom of the screen. Like that. So then you can select your number of tiles and go from there. Make some sense?
Yep.
All right. What else do you need to know how to do for? Well, let's go. What are you hoping to accomplish for next week?
Next week, let's see. So I'm obviously going to add everything that we've done today in this lesson, and then I think what I'll do is I'll have just a confirm page just to make sure they didn't make a mistake or anything. And then I can start some of the coding to pick the best candidates.
Okay.
I obviously don't know if I can finish it off, but I can definitely start it.
Okay.
And then I'll do the regular.
Sure. So, do you think you have everything you need then to accomplish that for next week?
I don't, but I think I'm good.
Okay. Perfect. But so just like before, shoot me an email if you have any questions, and I'll upload this video, and it'll be on the same playlist, but it'll be there probably in a half hour or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Oh, and I'll also let me go ahead and push the code here. So this is from 2/22/17. That way you have the updated code in the Git repository. Okay.
All right.
Same time, same station next week.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.